Billionaire spots his ex-wife with a son at the airport. When he finds out the boy is his, everything changes. What are you doing here? Get away from us. Sloan, please. Just let me explain. Explain what, Jameson? That you destroyed our marriage and now you want to play detective? That child has nothing to do with you. Those eyes. Sloan. He has my eyes. You know he does. So what? Genetics don't make you a father. Being there makes you a father. And you weren't there. You were never there. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. There's a difference. I thought I couldn't have children. I thought I was sterile. Then you should have talked to me instead of walking away. Instead of deciding my future without me. Instead of leaving me to raise your son alone. My son? Yes, Jameson. Your son. The son you'll never know because you gave up that right the day you asked for a divorce. Have you ever made a decision you thought was noble, only to discover it was the biggest mistake of your life? Have you ever walked away from someone you loved because you thought you were protecting them, only to realize you were just protecting yourself from pain? That's what happened to Jameson Cain. And the moment he saw that little boy at Los Angeles International Airport, with eyes that mirrored his own in a way that defied coincidence, his entire world didn't just shift, it shattered. Then it rebuilt itself into something he didn't recognize, something terrifying and beautiful and impossible. This is a story about second chances, about the lies we tell ourselves, about the cost of fear and the price of redemption. This is a story about a man who had everything except the one thing that mattered. And when he finally understood what he'd lost, he had to fight for something he didn't even know existed. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you think you know about love, sacrifice, and what it really means to be a father. Before we dive into how Jameson Cain's carefully constructed life came crashing down in the middle of Terminal 7, do me a favor. Hit that like button if you've ever made a decision you wish you could take back, if you've ever realized too late that fear made you throw away something precious. And subscribe to Love and Twilights with Dr. Phillips, because we're about to explore one of the most powerful redemption stories you'll ever hear. A story that proves it's never too late to fight for what matters, even when you don't deserve a second chance. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. August 17th, 3:15 in the afternoon, Los Angeles International Airport. The thing about airports is that they're designed for departures and arrivals, for hellos and goodbyes, for journeys that take you away from home or bring you back to it. But they're not designed for collisions with your past. They're not designed for the moment when your entire understanding of your life gets rewritten in the time it takes your heart to stop beating. That's what happened to Jameson Cain on a Thursday afternoon that started like any other and ended like nothing he could have imagined. He just stepped off a flight from Geneva, 14 hours in first class, reviewing contracts and financial projections, his mind already 3 steps ahead to the next deal, the next acquisition, the next challenge to conquer. At 41 years old, Jameson Cain was exactly where he'd always planned to be. His company, Aquavale Industries, had revolutionized water purification technology. They'd brought clean drinking water to communities in 37 countries. The United Nations had given him an award. Forbes had put him on their cover. His net worth had crossed into 10 figures 2 years ago. He wore custom-tailored suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He owned a penthouse in Los Angeles with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Pacific Ocean. He had homes in 3 countries. His calendar was booked solid for the next 18 months with speaking engagements, board meetings, investor presentations. From the outside, Jameson Cain's life looked perfect. From the inside, it felt like a beautiful, expensive tomb. He moved through Terminal 7 with the practiced efficiency of someone who spent more time in airports than in his own home. His carry-on rolled smoothly behind him. His phone was already buzzing with messages from his assistant Monica. The board meeting had been moved to Monday. The Singapore office needed his signature on the merger documents. His sister Bridget had called 3 times. He barely registered the chaos around him. The families reuniting with tears and laughter. The business travelers hunched over their laptops at charging stations. The children running between the rows of seats while exhausted parents tried to corral them. The announcement voices crackling overhead. The smell of coffee and fast food and recycled air. He was focused on getting to his car, getting to his penthouse, getting back to the work that filled every empty space in his life. And then he saw her. Time didn't slow down. That's what they say in movies, in books, in songs. Time slows down when something monumental happens. But that's not true. Time stopped. Completely. The entire airport, the entire world, seemed to hold its breath. Sloane. She stood near gate 42, about 30 feet away, her profile to him. Her dark auburn hair fell in waves past her shoulders, longer than he remembered. She wore a simple sundress the color of sea glass, and she was holding a child. Not an infant in a carrier, but a toddler. A little boy with a riot of dark curls, wearing tiny jeans and a t-shirt with a whale on it. He was clutching a stuffed elephant that looked well-loved, its gray fabric faded from countless washings. Jameson's phone slipped from his hand. He heard it clatter against the terminal floor somewhere far away. The sound was muffled, distant, unimportant, because the little boy had turned his head. And Jameson saw his face. It was like looking at a photograph of himself at that age. The same sharp cheekbones, the same nose, slightly upturned at the tip, the same shape of the mouth. But it was the eyes that made Jameson's knees nearly buckle. One brown, one green. Heterochromia, a genetic quirk that occurred in less than 1% of the population. The same condition Jameson had inherited from his grandmother. The same eyes that had made him self-conscious as a child until his grandmother told him they made him special, made him memorable, made him unique. Those eyes were staring back at him from the face of a child he'd never seen before. A child in Sloane's arms. His feet moved without permission from his brain. He was walking toward her. He couldn't have stopped if the building had been on fire. "Sloane," he said. His voice came out rough, like he'd swallowed gravel, like he hadn't spoken in years. She turned, and the transformation of her expression was something he knew would haunt him for the rest of his life. First, there was simple surprise, the normal reaction to seeing someone unexpected. Then recognition. Her jade eyes widened slightly. Then something else crossed her face, something raw and unguarded. Pain, longing, a flash of something that might have been hope or might have been despair. It was there for maybe 2 seconds. Then her entire face shuddered, like storm windows slamming closed before a hurricane. Her expression went cold and hard and completely closed off. "Jameson," she said. Her voice was ice over ocean, smooth and controlled and freezing. "I didn't know you were back in the country," she continued. Her arms tightened around the little boy, pulling him closer against her chest. The gesture was protective, possessive. "Keep away from what's mine." Jameson couldn't take his eyes off the child. The boy was watching him with solemn curiosity, those mismatched eyes bright and intelligent. He had a small hand wrapped around one of Sloane's fingers. His other hand clutched the elephant's trunk. "Who?" Jameson started. His throat had closed. He couldn't form the question. "Who is that? How old is he? Is he yours? Is he mine?" "We have a flight to catch," Sloane said. She shifted the boy higher on her hip and started to turn away. "Sloane, wait," Jameson said. He took a step forward. "That child. How old is he?" "That's none of your concern," she replied. Every word was precise, clipped, like she was cutting each one out of ice. "You made that very clear 2 years ago when you walked away from our marriage," she continued. The little boy chose that moment to speak. His voice was high and sweet, with that particular clarity that very young children have. "Mama," he said. "Who's that man?" "Mama." The word detonated in Jameson's chest like a bomb, shrapnel tearing through every carefully constructed wall he'd built around the space where his heart used to be. "No one, sweetheart," Sloane said to the boy. Her voice, when she spoke to him, was completely different. Warm, gentle, full of love. "No one important." She pressed a kiss to the boy's curly head and turned away. She walked toward the gate, disappearing into the crowd of travelers with their rolling luggage and their coffee cups and their normal lives where the world made sense. Jameson stood frozen in the middle of LAX Terminal 7, a billionaire who could move mountains with a phone call, a man who had negotiated with heads of state and closed deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars, a man who was known for his composure, his strategic thinking, his ability to stay calm under any pressure. That man couldn't move his feet, couldn't think, couldn't breathe. People flowed around him like water around a stone. A woman bumped into him with her suitcase and muttered an apology he didn't hear. Somewhere nearby, a baby was crying. The announcement system called for passengers boarding Flight 447 to San Francisco. The world kept moving while Jameson stood still, watching the space, where his past and his possible future had just walked away from him. "Mr. Kane." Monica's voice cut through the fog. His assistant had appeared at his elbow. She was holding his phone, which she must have picked up from where he dropped it. Her face showed concern. She'd worked for him for 5 years and had never seen him lose his composure. "Sir, are you all right?" she asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Jameson stared at the space where Sloane had vanished into the crowd. "Not a ghost," he said quietly. "A ghost would be easier." Monica waited, clearly unsure what to do. Jameson Kane didn't fall apart. He didn't drop phones or stand frozen in airports or look like someone had just torn his world in half. "The car is waiting," she finally said gently. "Should I tell Raymond you're ready?" Raymond was his driver. Jameson nodded slowly, still not entirely present. "Yes," he managed. "Tell him I'm coming." He forced his feet to move. One step, then another. Monica walked beside him, silent now, respecting whatever had just happened even though she didn't understand it. The drive to his penthouse in Westwood was a blur. Jameson sat in the back of the black Mercedes, staring out the window without seeing any of it. The palm trees lining the streets. The traffic crawling along the 405. The billboards advertising movies and lawyers and plastic surgeons. The sun reflecting off endless chrome and glass. All he could see was that little boy's face. Those eyes. The way he'd said mama with such trust and love. The way Sloane had held him like he was her entire world. Because he probably was. Raymond pulled up to the building. Jameson walked through the lobby like a man in a dream. Or a nightmare. He couldn't tell which. The doorman greeted him. He must have responded. He had no memory of it. The elevator carried him up to the 37th floor. The doors opened directly into his penthouse. 6,000 square feet of minimalist luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the Pacific. Custom furniture in shades of gray and white. Artwork that had cost more than most people earned in a year. A sound system that had required a specialist to install. A wine collection worth 6 figures. Everything clean and perfect and utterly devoid of life. He dropped his bag by the door and walked to the windows. The ocean stretched out to the horizon, endless and indifferent. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose and violet. On a normal day, he'd pour himself a bourbon, put on some jazz, review the day's work, plan tomorrow's strategy. Nothing about today was normal. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. The sound was insistent, demanding attention he couldn't give. Finally, he looked at the screen. 15 missed calls. 8 from Monica. 4 from board members. 3 from his sister, Bridget. He called Bridget back. She answered on the first ring. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" she asked. Bridget lived in San Francisco, working as a marine biologist. She'd always been the successful one who'd also managed to have a life. A husband. Friends. Balance. Things Jameson had sacrificed in his pursuit of empire building. It would be the same time in San Francisco as in Los Angeles, so he knew she was being sarcastic. Her way of saying she'd been worried. "I saw her," he said. A pause. Then, fully awake and alert despite the sarcasm. "Sloane?" "Yes." "Where?" "Lax. I was coming back from Geneva." "She was there, at the airport." He paused. The next words felt impossible to say out loud, like speaking them would make them real in a way he wasn't ready for. "Did you talk to her?" Bridget prompted. "Barely." He stopped, took a breath. "She had a child with her. A boy." "Bridget." He had my eyes. His sister was quiet for a long moment. He could hear her breathing. Could imagine her processing this information. Bridget was a scientist. She dealt in facts and evidence. But she was also his sister. She knew what those eyes meant. She'd seen their grandmother's heterochromia, had the family photos, understood the genetics. "What do you mean, your eyes?" she finally asked, though he suspected she already knew. "I mean heterochromia," he said. "Brown and green. Exactly like mine. Exactly like Grandma Iris. Exactly like the Kane family genetic marker that shows up maybe once every 3 generations." "How old was he?" "I don't know. Young. Maybe 18 months. 2 years. I didn't get a chance to ask. She wouldn't talk to me." "Jamie," Bridget said. No one called him Jamie except his sister and Sloane. Hearing the nickname now, in this context, made something crack in his chest. a fissure that had been there since the divorce, splitting wider. "What are you thinking?" Bridget asked. "I'm thinking about timing," he said. He walked away from the windows and sank onto his couch. The leather was soft and expensive and cold. "I'm thinking that we finalized the divorce 2 years ago, March 15th, if she was pregnant then. If she didn't tell me, did she say he was yours?" "She didn't say anything," Jameson replied. The conversation was replaying in his head on a loop. Every word, every expression. "She told me it was none of my business. Called me no one important." Then she walked away. Bridget sighed. He could picture her in her apartment in Pacific Heights, probably in her kitchen, because she always paced when she was thinking through a problem. Her husband Trevor would be working late at the hospital, so she'd be alone with her thoughts, and her whine and her worry for her brother who'd spent 2 years pretending he was fine. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know," Jameson admitted. "I don't know anything right now except that I saw a child with my eyes, being held by my ex-wife, and she looked at me like I was the enemy. You hurt her, Jamie. You ended the marriage. You left. I know. Do you? Do you know what that did to her? I tried to call her after the divorce. She wouldn't answer. Eventually she changed her number, but Paige told me she was devastated, that she didn't understand why you'd suddenly decided you didn't want her anymore. Paige was Sloane's best friend from college, a lawyer in San Francisco. She and Bridget had stayed in touch even after the divorce, though they'd carefully avoided talking to Jameson about Sloane. Some kind of unspoken agreement that it was too painful for everyone involved. "I never said I didn't want her," Jameson protested. "No," Bridget agreed. "You said you couldn't give her what she needed," which she interpreted as, you didn't want her. Can you blame her? He couldn't. That was the problem. He'd been so focused on his own noble sacrifice that he hadn't considered how Sloane would interpret his words, how much it would hurt her, how completely he was destroying the trust they'd built. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he said quietly. "You thought you were being noble," Bridget corrected. "There's a difference. Nobility would have been trusting her with the truth, trusting her to make her own choices about what kind of future she wanted. Instead, you made the decision for her. You took away her agency. You decided she'd be better off without you and didn't give her a say in the matter." The words landed like blows. Accurate. Devastating. "True. Did you ever actually get tested, Jamie?" Bridget asked. The question he'd been avoiding. "Did you ever confirm what that doctor told you when you were 17? The silence stretched between them, long enough that it became its own answer. "No," Jameson finally admitted. "The doctor said it was highly likely I couldn't have children after the mumps. I assumed. It seemed certain enough. And I didn't want confirmation, didn't want to face it. So I just carried it like this truth I knew about myself." "You assumed your way out of the best thing that ever happened to you," Bridget said. Her voice wasn't unkind, but it was blunt. Her scientist brain had no patience for decisions made on assumptions rather than data. "Now, you have to figure out if you're going to fix it, or if you're going to let fear win again." "How do I fix this?" he asked. "She won't talk to me. She has every right to hate me. I destroyed our marriage based on something I never even confirmed. And if that child is mine, I missed everything. The pregnancy, the birth, almost 2 years of his life." "You start by getting actual facts," Bridget said. "Get tested. Find out if you're actually sterile, or if you've been carrying around a false belief for 20 years. Then you find out if that little boy is yours. And if he is, you fight. You show up. You prove that you're not going to disappear again. What if she won't let me? Then you keep showing up anyway. You be consistent. You be patient. You prove through action, not words, that you've changed, that you understand what you lost, that you're willing to do whatever it takes to be part of your son's life." "If he is my son," Jameson said. "Jamie," Bridget's voice was gentle now. "A child with heterochromia, being raised by your ex-wife, born approximately 18 months after your divorce. What do you think the odds are that he's not yours?" She was right. He knew she was right. The statistical probability of a random child having the same rare genetic condition, being the right age, being Sloane's son, all of it. The odds were astronomical. That was his child. His son. A little boy who didn't know him, who'd called him no one. "Get tested," Bridget said. "Tomorrow. First thing. Get actual facts instead of assumptions." Then we'll figure out the next steps. Okay, he agreed. And Jamie, yeah, I'm proud of you for even considering this. A lot of men would have seen that kid and walked away, told themselves it wasn't their problem. The fact that you're calling me, that you're already thinking about how to fix this, that matters. After they hung up, Jameson sat in the gathering darkness of his penthouse and let himself feel, really feel. For the first time since he'd asked Sloane for a divorce, he let the walls down. Let the grief in, the regret, the staggering weight of what he'd thrown away. He'd convinced himself he was fine, that the divorce was for the best, that Sloane would find someone better, someone who could give her children. And he'd focus on his company and his mission, and that would be enough. It had never been enough. He'd thrown himself into work with manic intensity, expanded Aquavale into new markets, developed new technologies, worked 18-hour days, traveled constantly, anything to avoid the silence, the emptiness, the ghost of Sloane's presence in every corner of his life. And all of it, all of the work and the success and the accolades, had been built on a lie, on an assumption he'd never bothered to verify. He pulled out his phone and opened the Photos app, scrolled back past business meetings and conferences and award ceremonies, back past trips to Singapore and Dubai and Nairobi, back to a folder he'd hidden but never deleted, a folder he told himself he never looked at but that he opened late at night when the penthouse felt too empty and the success felt too hollow. Sloane on their wedding day, laughing at something he'd said, her head thrown back, her eyes bright with joy. She wore a simple white dress, barefoot on the beach in Malibu. They'd had a small ceremony, just close family and friends, nothing like the elaborate society wedding his mother had wanted. Sloane had insisted she wanted something intimate, something real. You're the only audience I need, she'd told him. Just you and the ocean and our people. She'd been so beautiful it hurt to look at her. Not the polished magazine beautiful of the women at charity galas, but real, radiant, genuinely happy. Her hair had been in loose waves, flowers tucked behind her ear. Her feet bare in the sand, her smile wide and unguarded. He'd stood at that makeshift altar and promised to love her for the rest of his life, to cherish her, to be her partner in everything. He'd broken every promise. The next photo, their honeymoon in Costa Rica, Sloane in a hammock strung between two palm trees, reading a manuscript for her first children's book. Her hair was in a messy bun. She wore one of his t-shirts and had a pencil tucked behind her ear. She'd been editing, making notes, so absorbed in her work that she hadn't noticed him taking the picture. She'd just signed her first publishing deal, a series of books about ocean creatures that taught children about marine conservation and environmental responsibility. The advance had been modest, but she'd been so excited she'd literally jumped up and down when her agent called with the news. "We're going to change the world," she'd said. "You with clean water, me with teaching kids to love the ocean. We're going to make everything better." They'd been a team, partners, balanced. He'd loved watching her work, loved the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her books, loved that she understood his passion for his company because she had the same passion for her writing. Another photo, their apartment in Santa Monica, before he'd made his first billion, before Aquavale had exploded into a global company, when they were just two people building a life together. Sloane in the kitchen, flour on her nose, laughing because she'd somehow managed to burn cookies that came from pre-made dough. The apartment had been small, 900 square feet, one bedroom, a kitchen barely big enough for two people, but it had been home. "We don't need a bigger place," Sloane had insisted. "This is perfect. We have everything we need." She'd made it beautiful. Plants on every surface, art from local markets, books overflowing from the shelves, their surfboards propped in the corner. It had been cluttered and chaotic and full of life. Everything his current penthouse wasn't. More photos. Sloane reading in bed, her glasses sliding down her nose. Sloane at a book signing, glowing with pride as children lined up for her autograph. Sloane on their couch, her feet in his lap, both of them exhausted after a long day, but content just to be together. Sloane asleep, her hair spread across the pillow, the morning light making her look like something out of a painting. They'd been married for 3 years. 3 years that felt like both a lifetime and a heartbeat. 3 years of building something real and solid and good. And then he destroyed it. The memory rose up, sharp and unforgiving. He didn't want to think about it. Had spent 2 years actively avoiding this memory. but it was there, demanding to be acknowledged. That last night, he could see it so clearly. February 12th, a date burned into his memory. They'd been at their dining table, the same small table where they'd eaten 1,000 meals together, celebrated promotions and book deals and anniversaries, made plans and dreams and promises. She'd made pasta, his favorite, homemade sauce that had simmered all afternoon. The apartment smelled like garlic and basil and tomatoes. She'd been in a good mood. Her latest book had hit the bestseller list that week. She'd been talking about ideas for the next one. And then she'd said it. "I've been thinking about starting to try," she'd said casually, twirling pasta on her fork. "Try what?" he'd asked, though his stomach had already started to sink. He'd known. On some level, he'd known what was coming. "For a baby," she'd replied. She'd looked up at him, with those jade eyes full of hope and excitement. "I know we talked about waiting, but I'm 31 now. My editor said I could work from home when I need to. And your company is stable." "We're stable. I think we're ready." Jameson had felt his entire world tilt. The fear had risen up like a tidal wave. The secret he'd been carrying, the diagnosis from when he was 17, the probability that he couldn't give her what she wanted. He should have told her then, should have been honest, should have said, "I need to tell you something about my medical history. Let's get tested. Let's figure this out together." Instead, he'd said, "I don't think I'm ready." The light in her eyes had dimmed a little, but she'd nodded, smiled, reached across the table to take his hand. "Okay," she'd said, "we don't have to rush. I just wanted to put it out there, so we could start thinking about it." But Jameson couldn't stop thinking about it. The fear consumed him. Every time he looked at Sloane, he saw her future disappointment, saw her realizing she'd married a man who couldn't give her children, saw her growing to resent him, saw their love curdling into bitterness. He'd started withdrawing, working later, traveling more, creating distance, and the whole time he'd been thinking, "I'm protecting her. I'm saving her from a future of disappointment." 2 weeks later, he'd asked for a divorce. He'd planned it carefully, made it seem like it was about their different goals, about timing, about him needing to focus on the company. He'd thought if he made it about work, she wouldn't blame herself. "I can't give you what you need," he'd told her. "You deserve someone who can give you children, a real family. I'm setting you free." She'd stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. "What are you talking about?" she'd asked. "Jameson, if you're not ready for kids, we can wait. I told you that. There's no rush. It's not about being ready," he'd said. I just can't give you the life you want." "You're the life I want," she'd said. Her voice had broken. "Whatever else we figure out together, that's what marriage is. Figuring things out together." But he hadn't listened, had been so convinced he was doing the noble thing, the selfless thing. He'd pushed until she'd finally, exhausted and heartbroken, agreed to the divorce. She'd moved out 2 days later. He'd buried himself in work, told himself it was for the best, that she'd thank him eventually, that she'd find someone who could give her everything she deserved. He'd never imagined she'd been pregnant when she left, that his assumption about his own sterility had been wrong, that he'd have a son growing up without him. Jameson set down his phone and walked to the bar, poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon, expensive stuff, aged 25 years. It tasted like smoke and regret. His phone buzzed again. He almost ignored it. Then he saw the name on the screen. "Monica," he answered. "Yes?" "Mr. Kane, I hope I'm not overstepping," she said carefully. "But earlier today at the airport, you seemed upset, and you dropped your phone, which you never do. And I wanted to make sure you're all right." Monica had been his assistant for 5 years. She'd seen him through the expansion into Asia, through the UN award ceremony, through countless crises and triumphs, but she'd never seen him fall apart, never seen him vulnerable. "I'm fine," he said automatically. "Sir, with respect, you're not, and I realize it's not my place to pry into your personal life. But if there's anything I can do to help." He was quiet for a moment. Then, surprising himself, he told her the truth. "I saw my ex-wife at the airport. She had a child with her. I think he might be mine." Monica's sharp intake of breath was audible. "Oh," she said. "Mr. Kane, I'm so sorry. That must have been a shock. That's one word for it. Do you—" she hesitated. "Do you need time off? I can reschedule your meetings." Clear your calendar. Yes, he said. I need you to clear everything for the next 2 weeks. Maybe longer. Delegate what you can. Push back what can wait. Cancel what must be canceled. 2 weeks? She sounded shocked. In 5 years, he'd never once taken more than 3 consecutive days off. I have a family emergency, he said. And Monica? Yes, sir. I need you to look into something else. Medical appointments. I need a full fertility panel done as soon as possible. Today, if there's any way to make it happen. There was a brief pause. I'll make it happen, she said. Give me 20 minutes. She called back in 15. Dr. Raymond Price can see you tomorrow morning at 8, she said. He's the best reproductive endocrinologist in Los Angeles. I explained it was urgent. He's making a special accommodation. Thank you, Monica. Is there anything else you need? He thought about it. About what came next. About the conversation with Bridget. About the little boy with his eyes. Yes, he said. I need you to connect me with Richard Torres, the pie we keep on retainer. Of course, I'll send you his direct line. After hanging up, Jameson dialed Richard. The investigator answered on the 3rd ring. Mr. Kane. What can I do for you? I need you to find someone, Jameson said. Sloane Winters. She was at LAX today, but I don't know if she lives in California or was just passing through. Your ex-wife? Richard's tone was carefully neutral. Professional. He'd done enough background checks for Aquavale to know the broad strokes of Jameson's personal history. Yes. You know about her? I make it my business to know things about my clients, Richard replied. What exactly are you looking for? Everything, Jameson said. Where she lives. What she's doing. Her financial situation. Who she associates with. And, he hesitated, anything about a child. A boy. Approximately 18 months to 2 years old. I need to know if he's mine. You want a DNA test? Not yet. Just information, birth records if you can access them, photos, anything that might confirm paternity or at least give me enough evidence to approach her. This is going to require some delicate work, Richard said. Birth records aren't public in California if the mother wants privacy. But I have sources. Give me 24 hours. I need it faster. Richard paused. 12 hours, he finally said. But it's going to cost extra. I don't care about the cost. Understood. I'll be in touch. Jameson hung up and stood at his windows. The sun had fully set now. The city lights spread out below him like a carpet of stars. The Pacific was dark beyond them, visible only as an absence of light. Somewhere out there, in this massive, sprawling city, or maybe somewhere else entirely, was Sloane, and a little boy with eyes that matched his own. A little boy who might be his son. The thought was overwhelming, terrifying, exhilarating. He might be a father. He might have missed almost 2 years of his child's life. He might have a chance to fix the biggest mistake he'd ever made. The night stretched out ahead of him. Jameson knew he wouldn't sleep. So he did what he always did when his mind wouldn't quiet. He worked. But this time, the work wasn't about Aquavale. It was about Sloane, about Dashiell, about figuring out how to rebuild a bridge he'd burned to ashes 2 years ago. He opened his laptop and started researching family law, paternity rights, custody arrangements. What would happen if he pursued legal action? What his rights would be if the child was proven to be his. The more he read, the more he realized that the legal path would destroy any chance he had of rebuilding something with Sloane. Courts and lawyers and custody battles. It would be brutal, ugly, painful for everyone involved, especially for a child who didn't understand why the adults in his life were fighting. No, he couldn't do that, wouldn't do that. This had to be handled differently, with patience, with consistency, with actually earning his way back into their lives instead of demanding access through legal force. But how did you prove to someone that you'd changed when they wouldn't even talk to you? He didn't have an answer. Morning came gray and cold. Jameson hadn't slept. He'd spent the night alternating between research and staring at photos of Sloane, of their life together, of everything he'd lost. At 7:30, he was in his car driving to Dr. Price's office in Beverly Hills. The building was modern glass and steel. The waiting room was empty at this hour. A nurse called him back almost immediately. She took his blood pressure, his temperature, his medical history. He told her about the mumps at 17, the orchitis, The prognosis, the assumption he'd carried for over 20 years. Dr. Price entered a few minutes later. He was in his early 60s with gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He had the calm, competent air of someone who'd spent decades helping people navigate the complicated intersection of biology and hope. "Mr. Kane," he said, shaking Jameson's hand. "Your assistant explained this is time-sensitive." "Yes," Jameson said. "I need to know if I'm sterile. I need to know today if possible. May I ask what prompted this urgency?" "I may have a son I didn't know about," Jameson said bluntly. "And if I do, then everything I believed about my medical history is wrong." Dr. Price nodded slowly. No judgment in his expression, just professional assessment. "Tell me about your medical history," he said. Jameson explained. The mumps at 17, the bilateral orchitis, the doctor's words, the prognosis that had shaped his entire adult life. "Did you ever have follow-up testing?" Dr. Price asked. "No. Why not?" Jameson was quiet for a moment. The same question Bridget had asked, the one he'd been avoiding for 20 years. "Fear," he finally admitted. "I was afraid of having it confirmed, so I just assumed the worst, built my life around that assumption, and made my biggest decisions based on something I never actually verified." Dr. Price made some notes on his tablet. "Well," he said, "let's get some actual data. I'll need blood work and a semen analysis. We'll test hormone levels, sperm count, motility, morphology, the complete picture. I can have preliminary results for you by late this afternoon. Complete results within 48 hours. The tests were uncomfortable and clinical and humiliating in the way medical procedures always are. Jameson sat in sterile rooms and provided samples and answered invasive questions and felt the weight of every decision he'd ever made pressing down on him like a physical thing. What if he was sterile? What if that little boy wasn't his? What if he'd destroyed his marriage for a real reason and seeing Sloane at the airport was just a coincidence? Some cosmic joke to remind him of what he'd lost? What if he wasn't sterile? What if he'd thrown away everything for nothing? What if he had a son he'd never known, never held, never been there for? He didn't know which answer would be worse. By 11 a.m., he was back in his penthouse. Monica had sent over files for the Singapore merger, documents that needed his review. He opened them, stared at the words, couldn't process any of it. The numbers that usually made perfect sense looked like random symbols. Contracts he could normally parse in minutes might as well have been written in ancient Greek. All he could think about was that phone call, the one that would come from Dr. Price later today, the one that would tell him whether the foundation his entire adult life had been built on was solid or sand. His phone rang at 4:27 p.m. "Dr. Price." Jameson's hand shook as he answered. "What did you find?" The doctor's voice was careful, professional, but there was something in his tone, something Jameson couldn't quite read. "Mr. Kane, I wanted to call you personally with the preliminary results," Dr. Price said. "We'll have the complete panel back in a day or two, but I thought you'd want to know the basics as soon as possible." And Jameson couldn't breathe. The entire world had narrowed to this moment, this answer. "Your sperm count is completely normal," Dr. Price said. "Above average, actually. Motility is excellent. Morphology looks good. Based on what I'm seeing, there's absolutely no indication of sterility. You are, by all measures, fully fertile and capable of fathering children." The room tilted. Jameson sat down hard on his couch. His vision blurred at the edges. His ears were ringing. "How is that possible?" he asked. His voice sounded distant to his own ears. "The doctor when I was 17 said it was highly likely. He said I should prepare myself for permanent sterility. Doctors sometimes err on the side of caution when giving prognoses to teenagers," Dr. Price explained, "especially with something as emotionally charged as fertility. The body can also recover more fully from orchitis than initially expected. It's not uncommon. And," he paused, "I hate to say this, but it's possible the original prognosis was simply overly pessimistic. Without follow-up testing, there was no way to know for certain how your body healed. So I've always been able to. As far as I can tell from these tests, yes, you've likely been fertile this entire time. I'll have the complete panel back to you in 48 hours, but I'd be shocked if anything changed this assessment." "Thank you," Jameson managed. His voice cracked on the words. After hanging up, Jameson sat in the silence of his penthouse and felt the full crushing weight of what he'd done. 24 years. He'd carried the burden of that diagnosis for 24 years. Let it shape every relationship, every decision, every dream he'd allowed himself to have or not have. And it had been wrong. Not just wrong, unnecessary, avoidable. If he'd just gone back for follow-up testing like the doctor recommended. If he'd just confirmed instead of assumed. If he'd just been brave enough to face the truth instead of hiding from it. He'd destroyed his marriage based on a maybe, on a possibility that had never been tested, never confirmed. He'd walked away from the woman he loved to spare her a loss that was never going to happen. And in doing so, he'd created a real loss, a catastrophic one. If that little boy at the airport was his son, if Dashiell was really his child, then Jameson had missed everything. The moment Sloane found out she was pregnant, the ultrasounds, feeling the baby kick, the birth, first breath, first cry, first smile, first laugh, first tooth, first word, first step, 19 months of moments he could never reclaim, memories he could never make, a relationship that should have been building from the first second of that child's life, gone, because he'd been too afraid to get tested, too proud to be vulnerable, too convinced he was being noble when really he was just being a coward. His phone buzzed. A text from Richard Torres. Found her. Call me. Jameson's hands were still shaking as he dialed. What do you have? He asked. Your ex-wife lives in Monterey, Richard said without preamble. He was efficient, professional, no wasted words. Address is 847 Cypress Lane, small cottage near the bay. Been there about 18 months, which coincides with when the child would have been born. She owns it outright. Paid cash. $350,000. Jameson made mental calculations. Sloane's book advances had been good, but not that good. Someone must have helped her. Her parents maybe. Or she'd sold something. Either way, she'd established a life in Monterey. Put down roots. What else? She's published 3 children's books since your divorce, Richard continued. All bestsellers. The Ocean Secret sold over 2 million copies. She does well financially. Not billionaire well, but comfortable. She's active in local conservation efforts, volunteers with the Monterey Bay Aquarium, teaches writing workshops for kids. Jameson felt a surge of pride despite everything. Sloane had always been talented, passionate, dedicated. Of course she was thriving. She didn't need him to succeed. But maybe he could have been part of that success, part of that life, if he hadn't thrown it all away. The child? He asked. Yes. Richard's tone shifted slightly. More careful. Name is Dashiell Alexander Winters. Born January 15th at Community Hospital of the Monterey Peninsula. Birth weight 7 pounds 3 ounces. Healthy. Mother is listed as Sloane Winters. Father is listed as unknown. Dashiell Alexander. She'd given him Jameson's middle name, Alexander, even though she'd listed father unknown, even though she hadn't told him about the pregnancy. She'd still given their son his middle name. What else? Jameson asked. She's not married, Richard said. No boyfriend on record. Lives alone with the child. There's a woman, Paige Larson, who visits frequently. Sleeps over sometimes. Appears to be the primary babysitter and support system. They were roommates in college. Jameson remembered Paige. Sharp, loyal, protective of Sloane. She'd probably been the one Sloane called when she found out about the pregnancy. The one who'd helped through the birth. The one who'd been there for all the moments Jameson had missed. He hesitated. Is there any indication Sloane told anyone about the father? Any documentation? Any record of her trying to contact me? No, Richard said. And I looked. If she'd tried to reach you through legal channels, through your company, through any official route, there'd be a trail. There isn't one. She never filed for child support. Never named you as father. Never, as far as I can tell, told anyone who the father is except possibly Paige. Jameson processed this. She'd been completely alone. Had made the choice not to tell him. Had built a life for herself and their son without him. And Mr. Kane? Richard said. Yes? I'm sending you photos. Just prepare yourself. The email came through a moment later. Jameson opened it with shaking hands. The first photo showed Sloane's cottage, the blue craftsman with white shutters, Wildflower garden in full bloom. A small fence. The wooden whale beside the door that Jameson recognized from her old apartment. She'd kept it. Through everything, she'd kept that piece of their life together. More photos. Sloane at a farmer's market, pushing a stroller. You could only see the back of the child's head from this angle. Dark curls. Small hands gripping the stroller sides. Another photo. Sloane on the beach. This one was closer. She was holding Dashiell's hand as he toddled through the surf. The little boy was laughing, mouth wide open, pure joy on his face. Sloane was bent down to his level, smiling at him with such love it made Jameson's chest ache. Another, Sloane at a bookstore, sitting in a reading circle with a group of children. Dashiell was in her lap. He was looking up at her while she read, completely absorbed. Trust and love evident in every line of his small body. And then photos of Dashiell himself. Close-ups that Richard must have gotten with a telephoto lens. The resemblance was even more striking than at the airport. The same facial structure Jameson saw in his own childhood photos. The same expressions. The same gestures. And those eyes. One brown, one green. Unmistakable. Undeniable. This was his son. Jameson knew it with the kind of certainty that didn't require DNA tests or legal documents. This was his child. His flesh and blood. A little boy named Dashiell, who was 19 months old and didn't know his father existed. He looked at the photos for a long time, Dashiell laughing, Dashiell concentrating on building a sandcastle, his tongue poking out slightly in focus. Dashiell asleep in Sloane's arms, his curly head tucked against her shoulder, completely peaceful and safe. She'd done it all alone. Pregnancy, labor, birth, sleepless nights, teething, first cold, learning to crawl, learning to walk, all of it without him. Because he'd left her. Because he'd decided for both of them that they couldn't have a future. Because he'd been too much of a coward to just get tested, to just have an honest conversation, to just trust that they could face challenges together instead of assuming she'd be better off without him. His phone rang. His sister. "Did you find out anything?" Bridget asked without preamble. "He's mine," Jameson said. "His name is Dashiell Alexander. He's 19 months old, born January 15th, and Sloane raised him completely alone because I walked away. Oh, Jamie, I got tested today. Dr. Price called with preliminary results. I'm not sterile. I never was. I threw away my marriage, abandoned my pregnant wife, and missed the first 19 months of my son's life because I was too afraid to spend 2 hours getting tested for something I'd been assuming for 24 years. His voice broke on the last words. Bridget was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" she finally asked. "I'm going to Monterey," he said. "Tomorrow. I'm going to talk to her. I'm going to meet my son. Jamie, you can't just show up and demand access. She has all the power here, legally and emotionally. You need to think about this strategically. I've spent my whole life being strategic," he said, "making plans, calculating risks, minimizing variables. And where did it get me? I'm 41 years old. I'm a billionaire. My company has changed millions of lives. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. And I'm completely alone because I was too afraid to fight for what actually mattered. So, what's your plan?" "I don't have one," he admitted. "I'm just going to show up and keep showing up until she agrees to talk to me, until she lets me be part of his life. However long that takes, whatever I have to do, that could backfire spectacularly," Bridget warned. "She could get a restraining order. She could move. She could make this very ugly very quickly. Probably. But doing nothing isn't an option anymore. I missed 19 months. I'm not missing another day." After they hung up, Jameson opened his laptop and booked a flight to Monterey for first thing in the morning. 6 a.m. departure. He'd be there by 7. Then he called Monica. "Clear my schedule for the foreseeable future," he said. "Sir?" She sounded genuinely shocked. "You have the board meeting on Monday. The Singapore merger needs your signature. The investor presentation in New York. The keynote speech in Seattle. Delegated. All of it. But sir, these are commitments you made months ago. The board specifically needs your approval on the expansion plans. The Singapore deal can't move forward without you. Tell the board I have a family emergency and won't be available for at least 2 weeks, possibly longer," Jameson said. Promote Tyler to interim CEO. He's been ready for more responsibility. Let him handle the board meeting. Tyler had been his VP of operations for 3 years. Smart, capable, ready. The Singapore deal, he continued, can wait 72 hours for my signature. Send the documents to Monterey. I'll review and sign them there. And cancel Seattle. Offer them a video keynote instead. Tell them I'll record something and they can play it on screen. Is everything all right? Monica asked carefully. In 5 years, she'd never heard him cancel commitments, never heard him delegate major decisions. You said, family emergency. Is your sister okay? My sister is fine, he said. But I just found out I have a son, and I need to fix the fact that he doesn't know me. Monica was silent for a beat. Oh, she finally said. Mr. Kane, congratulations. And also, I'm so sorry. That must be incredibly complicated. It is, he agreed. But it's also the most important thing I've ever done. More important than any deal or any board meeting. So I need you to make this work. Make the company function without me for a while. I hired good people. Let them do their jobs. I'll take care of it, she said. And, sir, good luck. After hanging up, Jameson stood at his windows one last time, looking out at the city that had been his home for 15 years, at the life he'd built that suddenly felt hollow and pointless. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, he'd go to Monterey. He'd face Sloan. He'd try to meet his son. Tomorrow, he'd begin the hardest fight of his life, not for money or market share or competitive advantage, but for something infinitely more valuable and infinitely harder to win. A chance to be a father, a chance to earn back the trust he destroyed, a chance to build something real out of the ashes of his biggest mistake. He didn't know if it was possible, but he had to try. Morning came gray and cold. Jameson hadn't slept. He'd spent the hours between midnight and dawn sitting at his windows, watching the city lights slowly give way to the pale wash of sunrise. His suitcase sat by the door, packed, ready. At 4:30 a.m., he showered, put on jeans and a simple sweater instead of his usual suit. He wanted to look approachable, human, not like the billionaire CEO who'd walked away from his marriage. At 5 a.m., his car arrived. Raymond looked surprised to see him with just one bag and no briefcase. Airport, sir? Raymond asked. Yes, Lax. But, Raymond? Yes, Mr. Kane. I won't be needing you for a while. Take the next few weeks off. Paid. Spend time with your family. The older man's eyes widened slightly. In 8 years, Jameson had never given him more than 3 consecutive days off. Are you sure, sir? I'm sure. Family is important. Don't waste time away from yours. The drive to LAX was quiet. Jameson watched the city pass by. The streets were mostly empty at this hour. A few delivery trucks, early morning joggers, people heading to jobs that started before dawn. He thought about all the times he'd made this drive, hundreds of flights, dozens of countries, always chasing the next deal, the next opportunity, the next achievement, and he'd missed what was right in front of him. The flight to Monterey was short, less than an hour. Jameson sat in first class and stared out the window at the California coast sliding by below. Somewhere down there, in a blue cottage with white shutters, his son was probably just waking up, maybe crying for his mother, maybe already playing. Jameson had no idea what a 19-month-old's routine looked like. He had no idea what his own son was like. The realization hit him again. Fresh, painful. He was about to try to be part of a child's life when he didn't know that child's favorite food, didn't know what made him laugh or cry, didn't know if he was an early riser or if he liked to sleep in, didn't know anything except that Dashiell had his eyes in his middle name and Sloane's love. The plane touched down at Monterey Regional Airport at 7:12 a.m. Jameson rented a car, nothing flashy, a simple sedan. He didn't want to show up at Sloane's house in something that screamed wealth and disconnection. The drive to Cypress Lane took 15 minutes. The morning was overcast, typical for Monterey. The marine layer hung low and thick, making everything seem soft and muted. He could smell the ocean, salt and kelp, and that particular dampness that came from living near the Pacific. He'd been to Monterey with Sloane before, years ago, back when they were married. They'd stayed at a bed and breakfast and spent 3 days doing nothing but walking on the beach and eating fresh seafood and talking about their dreams. She'd told him she wanted to write books that would make children care about the ocean. That would teach them the world was worth protecting. He'd told her he wanted to bring clean water to every person on the planet, that no child should die from something as preventable as contaminated water. They'd been so full of purpose, so aligned, so convinced they could change the world together. And they had changed the world, just separately, alone. Without each other. Jameson found 847 Cypress Lane. The cottage looked exactly like Richard's photos. Blue craftsman, white shutters, wildflower garden, the wooden whale beside the door. He sat in his rental car and tried to gather courage. What was he going to say? How did you start a conversation like this? Hi, I know I destroyed our marriage based on a medical diagnosis I never bothered to confirm, but I'm here now because I want to be part of our son's life. It sounded insane even in his own head, but he didn't have a better plan, and he'd come all this way, and his sister was right. He'd spent his whole life calculating and strategizing, and it had gotten him nowhere that mattered. So he got out of the car, walked up the path through the wildflowers, noticed the garden was well tended, noticed there was a small tricycle on the porch, red, with streamers on the handlebars. His son's tricycle. He knocked on the door with the whale beside it. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then he heard footsteps. Light. Quick. The door opened. Sloane stood there with a dish towel in her hands. She wore yoga pants and an oversized sweater. Her hair was in a messy bun. No makeup. She looked tired, beautiful, real. She was clearly expecting someone else, maybe a delivery, maybe a neighbor. When she saw him, her entire body went rigid. The dish towel fell from her hands. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Her voice was flat, carefully controlled, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand gripped the doorframe. "We need to talk," he said, "about Dashiell." Her face went pale, then flushed, then pale again. "No," she said, "we don't. Please leave. Sloane, I know he's mine. I know you were pregnant when we divorced, and you didn't tell me. You have no right," she started. "I have every right," Jameson interrupted. His voice rose to spite himself. "That's my son. Those are my eyes, Sloane. I saw him." "I know. Your son?" She laughed. It was a bitter, broken sound. "You gave up that right when you walked out on our marriage, when you decided you didn't want a family with me. That's not what happened. Then what did happen, Jameson?" Her voice was rising now too, "because from where I'm standing, you asked for a divorce. You told me you couldn't give me what I needed. You left me. 2 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. Was I supposed to call you? Beg you to come back? You made your choice. I thought I was sterile." The words exploded out of him. Loud, raw, desperate. Sloane stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "What?" she said. "I had mumps when I was 17, he continued. The words were tumbling out now. Fast, urgent. The doctor said I probably couldn't have children. I thought I was sparing you a childless marriage. I thought I was setting you free to find someone who could give you the family you wanted." She was still staring at him, her mouth slightly open, shock written across every feature. "You thought you were sterile," she repeated slowly. "So you divorced me, without telling me why, without giving me a choice, without even getting tested to confirm." Each word landed like a physical blow. "I was trying to do the right thing," he said weakly. "The right thing?" Her voice climbed. "The right thing would have been to talk to me, to treat me like a partner instead of making decisions about our future without me. Do you have any idea?" Her voice cracked. "Do you have any idea what it was like to find out I was pregnant 2 weeks after my husband left me?" Tears were streaming down her face now. Jameson felt something inside him shatter. "To realize I was going to have a baby alone because you decided I deserved better?" She continued. "To go through pregnancy terrified and alone? To labor for 19 hours with only Paige and my mother because my husband, the father of my child, had walked away?" "Sloane, I'm sorry," he said. His own voice was breaking now. "God, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. About all of it. I got tested. Last week. I'm not sterile. I never was." She laughed again. That same awful broken sound. "Well," she said, "congratulations on your fertility. 2 years too late. Let me meet him," Jameson pleaded. Please, let me know my son. Why should I? But her anger was fading now, giving way to exhaustion. Why should I let you into his life when you could just leave again? I won't leave. I swear to you, I won't. Your promises don't mean anything to me anymore. She started to close the door. Sloan, please, he said. Don't shut me out. I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know I destroyed everything. But that little boy deserves to know his father. And he stopped. His voice broke completely. I missed 19 months of his life. Don't make me miss the rest of it. She paused, her hand on the door. For a moment, he thought she might relent. Then she shook her head. Legally, you have no claim, she said quietly. The birth certificate lists no father. You walked away. Stay walked away. The door closed, softly, with a quiet finality that was somehow worse than if she'd slammed it. Jameson stood on her porch as the marine layer began to lift. He could hear sounds from inside the house. A child's voice, high and sweet, asking a question he couldn't make out. Sloane's voice responding, gentle, loving, everything he wasn't allowed to be part of. He walked back to his rental car, sat in the driver's seat, and let himself feel the full weight of the rejection. She had every right to refuse him. He knew that. He'd destroyed their marriage, abandoned her when she needed him most, missed the birth of their child, but knowing she had the right didn't make it hurt less. His phone buzzed. A text from Bridget. How did it go? He typed back with shaking hands. She won't see me. 3 dots appeared. Then, so what now? Jameson looked at the cottage, at the life Sloane had built without him, at the home where his son was growing up not knowing his father existed. Now, he typed, I show her I'm not leaving. He drove to a hotel near the waterfront, the Monterey Bay Inn. It was nice without being ostentatious. Clean rooms, ocean views, the kind of place a normal person might stay, not the luxury resorts he usually chose. He checked into a room on the 3rd floor, unpacked his single suitcase, stood at the window and watched fishing boats bob in the gray water of the bay. Then he sat down with his laptop and made a plan. Not a business plan, not a strategy for hostile takeover or market disruption, but a plan for how to prove to the mother of his child that he wasn't going anywhere. First, he needed to actually relocate to Monterey, not just stay in a hotel, put down roots, show this wasn't temporary. He called Monica. I need you to look into commercial real estate in Monterey, he said. Something suitable for a regional office for Aquavale. And I need a house, not a mansion. Something normal. 3 bedrooms, good school district, family neighborhood. You're actually moving there, Monica said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I'll have options for you by end of day. Next, he needed to show Sloane he understood the magnitude of what he'd done, that he wasn't just throwing money at the problem. He spent an hour crafting a letter, handwritten, 5 pages. He explained everything. The diagnosis when he was 17, the fear that had controlled his life, his misguided attempt at nobility, the test results that proved he'd been wrong all along. He didn't make excuses, didn't try to justify, just laid out the truth and apologized for the divorce, for not being there, for missing Dashiell's birth, for every moment he'd stolen from all of them through his cowardice. At the end, he wrote this, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I destroyed your trust, but Dashiell deserves to know his father, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of being in his life. I'm not asking you to forget what I did. I'm asking you to let me try to make it right, however long that takes. He put the letter in an envelope, drove back to Cypress Lane, left it on her porch in a waterproof box. He didn't knock, didn't wait for her to answer, just left it and drove away. Day 2. He went to a local bookstore, the kind of independent place Sloane would love, found the children's section, bought first editions of classic ocean books, The Rainbow Fish, Mr. Seahorse, A House for Hermit Crab, books he hoped Sloane would read to Dashiell, books that might make his son think about the ocean and conservation and the world they were inheriting. He left them on her porch in the same waterproof box. Still didn't knock. Day 3. He made a donation, 7 figures, to the Pacific Marine Mammal Center in Monterey, in Dashiell's name. The receipt and a letter from the director thanking Dashiell Alexander Winters for his generous contribution went in the box on Sloane's porch. Day 4. He didn't leave anything. He just parked across the street from her cottage. Sat in his car where she could see him through her window. He stayed there for 3 hours, from 9 a.m. to noon. She never came out, never acknowledged him. But he saw the curtains move, knew she was watching. At noon, a car pulled up. A woman got out. Tall, black, professional looking. Paige. He recognized her from Richard's photos. She looked at Jameson's car, looked at the cottage, then walked inside. 5 minutes later, the curtains in the front window were yanked closed. Message received. He was making Sloane uncomfortable. Paige was here as reinforcement. He drove away. But he came back the next day. Day 5. He left a photo album on the porch. Pictures of himself as a child, at Dashiell's age, at 2, at 3, at 4. The resemblance was undeniable, impossible to ignore. Pictures of his grandmother Iris with her heterochromatic eyes. Pictures of his sister Bridget as a baby. Pictures of his parents. A family medical history. Everything Dashiell might want to know someday about where he came from. A note attached. For when he's old enough to ask questions. Day 6, 2 a.m. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered immediately. Heart pounding. "Stop leaving things on my porch," Sloane's voice said. Sharp but not quite hostile. "You're going to give the neighbors ideas. I'll stop when you agree to talk to me," he replied. "We talked. At my door. It didn't go well. Then we'll talk again. I'm not leaving Monterey, Sloane. I've relocated my base of operations. I'm here for as long as it takes." A long silence. He could hear her breathing on the other end. Could imagine her in her cottage, maybe standing in the kitchen, maybe sitting in the dark. "You can't just upend your entire life," she finally said. "Watch me," he replied. "I have video conferencing. Email. Phone. The company won't collapse without my physical presence in Los Angeles. I should have learned that lesson years ago. Work can happen anywhere, but my son is here, so I'm here." He paused, softened his voice. "I'm not asking to move into your life," he continued. "I'm just asking for a chance to know my son. Let me prove I'm not going anywhere. Let me prove I've changed." Another silence, longer this time. He held his breath. "People don't change, Jameson," she said quietly. "Maybe not, but they can grow. They can learn from catastrophic mistakes. They can choose differently when given a second chance." He heard her sigh, a long exhale that carried 2 years of pain and exhaustion. "There's a coffee shop on Lighthouse Avenue," she finally said. "Rosie's, tomorrow. 10 a.m. Come alone. We'll talk." She hung up before he could respond, but it didn't matter. She'd agreed to meet him. It was a start, a fragile, tenuous beginning. Jameson lay in his hotel room and stared at the ceiling and let himself feel something he hadn't felt in 2 years. Hope. The morning of the meeting, Jameson woke at 5 a.m. Couldn't go back to sleep. He showered, changed clothes 3 times, settled on jeans and a button-down shirt. Casual, but respectful. He was at Rosie's Coffee by 8:30, 2 hours early. He ordered a black coffee and sat at a corner table and watched the door. The coffee shop was exactly the kind of place Sloane would choose. Local, independent, mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, the smell of fresh-baked scones, a bulletin board covered with flyers for yoga classes and beach cleanups and community events. At 9:45 she walked in. She wore jeans and a sweater. Her hair was down. She carried a bag over her shoulder. She looked tired, beautiful, guarded. She saw him immediately. Walked to his table without stopping at the counter. "I already ordered you a chai latte," he said as she sat down. "Your usual, if you still drink them." "I do," she said. Then, after a pause, "Thank you." The barista brought over her drink a moment later. Sloane wrapped her hands around the cup. That familiar gesture. She'd always done that. Held hot drinks like they could warm something inside her that was always cold. "Thank you for meeting me," Jameson said. "I read your letter," she replied, not looking at him, eyes on her chai. "Twice. And I don't know what to do with it. You devastated me, Jameson. You left. No matter how noble you thought your reasons were, you left. I know. Do you? Do you know what it's like to spend 3 years building a life with someone and then have them just walk away? To find out you're pregnant and have no one to tell except your best friend because your husband is already gone? Her voice was controlled, careful, but he could hear the pain underneath. Raw, unhealed. To go through pregnancy alone, she continued. To be terrified every day that something would go wrong and you'd have no one. To labor for 19 hours and have your mother on one side and your best friend on the other, and an empty space where your husband should have been. Where were you when I was in labor? She asked. Her voice broke. Where were you when I brought Dashiell home and didn't sleep for 3 days straight? Where were you for his first cold? His first tooth? His first steps? I didn't know, Jameson said. His own voice was rough. I didn't know, Sloan. If I had, I would have been there. Would you? Or would your company have been more important? Your deals? Your expansion into Asia? She was right to doubt him. He'd given her every reason to believe work came first. 2 years ago, you might be right, he said. 2 years ago, I probably would have convinced myself that closing. A deal mattered more than being there for a doctor's appointment. That expanding into new markets was more important than reading bedtime stories. But I'm not that man anymore. What changed? She asked. And don't say seeing Dashiell at the airport. That's convenient. That's easy. What actually changed? Jameson was quiet for a long moment, thinking, trying to find the truth instead of the answer he thought she wanted to hear. I think losing you changed me, he finally said, but I was too proud to admit it, too focused on work to examine why I was so empty. I told myself I was fine, that the divorce was for the best, that you'd find someone better and I'd focus on the company and everything would be fine. He looked at her directly, but it wasn't fine. I worked 18-hour days because going home meant facing how alone I was. I traveled constantly because being in motion meant I didn't have to think. I said yes to every opportunity, every deal, every expansion because achievement was the only thing that made me feel like my life had purpose. And then I saw you at the airport, with a child who had my eyes. And in that moment, I realized I'd been lying to myself for 2 years. I wasn't fine. I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was too afraid to be vulnerable, too convinced I knew what was best for you instead of just trusting you. Sloane's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You broke me, she said softly. When you left, when you told me I deserved better like I was some charity case you were nobly releasing, you broke something in me. I didn't understand. I thought we were happy. I thought we were building something real. We were, he said. We were happy. We were building something real. And I destroyed it because I was a coward. She looked at him for a long time, searching his face, looking for something, sincerity maybe, or proof that he meant what he said. Tell me about the diagnosis, she finally said. Tell me everything. So he did. He told her about being 17, about the mumps and the complications, about the doctor's words, about the fear that had taken root in his teenage brain and never left. He told her about carrying that diagnosis like a secret shame for 24 years, about never getting tested because he was afraid of confirmation, about watching her talk about wanting children and feeling the weight of what he thought he couldn't give her. He told her about the night he'd asked for a divorce, about convincing himself he was being noble, about believing she'd be better off with someone who could give her everything she wanted. And he told her about the test he'd finally gotten, about Dr. Price's call, about learning that he'd been wrong all along, that he'd destroyed their marriage based on assumption, a fear, a belief he'd never bothered to verify. When he finished, Sloane was crying, silent tears running down her face. You should have told me, she said. You should have trusted me with the truth. I know. We could have faced it together. We could have gotten you tested. We could have talked about options, adoption, treatment, whatever. But you didn't give me that chance. You decided for both of us. I know, he said again, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. She wiped her eyes, took a sip of her chai. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier. What do you want, Jameson? What are you actually asking for? I want to know my son, he said simply. I want to be part of his life. I'm not asking to take him away from you. I'm not asking for custody or overnight visits or anything that disrupts the life you've built. I just want to know him, to be there, to be his father. He paused. And I want to try to make amends to you, not to get back together. I understand that's probably not possible, but to show you that I understand what I did, that I'm sorry, that I'm different now. Different how? I've relocated to Monterey. I'm opening a regional office for Aquavale here. I'm buying a house. I'm putting down roots. This isn't temporary. I'm not visiting for a week and then flying back to Los Angeles. I'm here for as long as it takes. Sloane absorbed this. Processing. If I agree to this, she finally said, there are rules. You don't get to come and go. You don't get to play daddy when it's convenient and disappear when work gets busy. This isn't a hobby or a project. This is my son's heart we're talking about. Our son, Jameson said gently. She looked at him sharply, then nodded slowly. Our son, and if you hurt him, if you make promises you don't keep, I will make sure you never see him again. I don't care how many lawyers you hire. I won't hurt him, Jameson said. Or you. Not again. She studied him for another long moment. Okay, she said. We start slow. Supervised visits. You don't get to be daddy right away. You're just Jameson, a friend of Mommy's. We see how Dashiell responds, how you handle it. Then we go from there. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was permission. A door, slightly ajar. Thank you, he said, and he meant it with every cell of his body. Don't thank me yet, she replied. You have no idea what you're signing up for. Toddlers are chaos incarnate. For the first time since sitting down, she almost smiled. It was the most beautiful thing he'd seen in 2 years. They scheduled the first meeting for Saturday afternoon. Neutral territory. The Monterey Bay Aquarium. Lots of distractions for Dash if things get uncomfortable, Sloane explained. And it's public. Safe. No pressure. Jameson arrived 30 minutes early, bought a ticket, stood in the parking lot and tried to control his breathing. He was about to meet his son, his actual son, for the first time as a father instead of a stranger at an airport. The enormity of it was overwhelming. When Sloane's car pulled in, his heart nearly stopped. She got out first, then opened the back door to unbuckle Dashiell from his car seat. The little boy emerged, clutching his elephant. Peanut. Jameson remembered that from the airport. The elephant's name was Peanut. Dashiell wore tiny jeans and a t-shirt with an octopus on it. His dark curls were wild in the ocean breeze. Those mismatched eyes were bright with curiosity as he looked around at all the people. Jameson couldn't breathe. This was his son, his child, part of him walking around in the world. Sloane walked over with Dashiell on her hip. Dash, she said gently. This is Jameson. He's going to see the fishies with us today. Can you say hi? Dashiell regarded Jameson with solemn assessment. Those eyes, one brown and one green, studying him carefully. Then, apparently finding him acceptable, Dashiell waved, his small hand opening and closing. Hello, he said. It was the most ordinary moment. A toddler's greeting, nothing special to anyone else in the parking lot. But to Jameson, it rearranged his entire existence. Hello, Dashiell, he managed. His voice was thick. I like your elephant. Peanut, Dash informed him seriously. His name, Peanut. That's a very good name, Jameson said. He had to concentrate on not crying, on staying composed, on being the stable adult presence this child needed instead of the emotional wreck he actually was. Should we go inside? Sloane asked, watching Jameson carefully. He nodded, didn't trust his voice. The aquarium was crowded with weekend families, children pressed against glass tanks, couples taking photos, school groups moving in coordinated chaos. But Jameson saw only one child. Dashiell was enchanted by everything. The jellies floating like dreams in their cylindrical tanks, the sea otters somersaulting through the water, the massive kelp forest with its schools of silver fish swaying through the fronds. Mama, look, he kept saying. Mama, look. His vocabulary was limited, but his excitement was infinite. He pressed his hands against the glass, jumped up and down, pointed at everything with the confidence of someone discovering the world for the first time. Jameson hung back slightly, letting Sloane lead, not wanting to intrude on their rhythm, but then they got to the touch tanks. Shallow pools filled with sea stars and anemones and small crabs. Sloane helped Dashiell reach into the water to touch a purple sea star. Gentle, she reminded him. We have to be gentle with ocean creatures. They're our friends. Friends, Dashiell repeated. He patted the sea star with exquisite care. His face was pure wonder. Jameson watched this. Sloane patient and loving. Dashiell curious and sweet. This was what he'd missed. These moments, this relationship, this love. You want to try? Sloane asked. It took Jameson a moment to realize she was talking to him. I don't want to intrude, he started. You're here, aren't you? She gestured to the tank. Help him with the anemone. He's been dying to touch one, but they're tricky. Jameson knelt beside his son. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. The same nose, the same shape of ears, the same expressions he saw in his own childhood photos. Want to feel how weird this is? He asked Dashiell, pointing to a green anemone. Dashiell nodded enthusiastically. Jameson helped guide the small hand into the water. When Dashiell's fingers brushed the anemone's tentacles, his eyes went wide. Sticky, he announced. Sticky, Jameson agreed. His throat was tight. That's how they catch their food. They spent an hour at the touch pools. Somewhere during that hour, Dashiell started bringing creatures to Jameson to look at, dragging him by the hand from pool to pool. Each touch of that small hand in his was a revelation. This was his son, his flesh and blood, and for the first time, he was getting to actually be with him. At the cafe, Sloane bought Dashiell a cookie shaped like an octopus. The boy devoured it with messy enthusiasm, getting crumbs everywhere. Jameson found himself smiling, really smiling, not the professional smile he used at meetings, but genuine joy. He's wonderful, Jameson said quietly while Dashiell was distracted by a passing dog. I know, Sloane replied. Her voice was soft. He's my whole heart. Sloane, Jameson, didn't know how to finish. Sorry seemed insufficient. Thank you seemed wrong. Don't, she said, understanding what he couldn't say. Not yet. Just show up. Keep showing up. That's all I'm asking. When the visit ended, Dashiell surprised everyone by hugging Jameson's leg before getting back in his car seat. Bye, Jamie's son, he said, mangling the name adorably. Bye, Dash, Jameson replied. His throat was so tight he could barely speak. He watched them drive away, stood in the parking lot long after their car had disappeared, and for the first time in 2 years felt like maybe, just maybe, he could make this right. Over the following weeks, the visits became routine. Twice a week at first, then 3 times. Parks and playgrounds gave way to Sloane's cottage, to playing in the backyard, to reading stories on the couch. Dashiell grew comfortable with Jameson's presence, started looking forward to his visits. Jamie here today? Became a common question. Jameson had never been Jamie before. His sister called him that. Sloane used to. But hearing it from his son's mouth, he treasured it. It felt intimate, real, like he was actually becoming part of Dashiell's life instead of just visiting it. He learned his son's routines, that Dashiell hated bananas but loved blueberries, that he could watch the same ocean documentary 20 times without getting bored, that he had a blanket named Bubba that he couldn't sleep without, that he was cautious with new people but gentle with animals. He learned how to be useful, how to change diapers efficiently now instead of like someone defusing a bomb, how to cut grapes into quarters to prevent choking, how to distract during a tantrum with silly voices and made-up songs. Sloane watched all of this with cautious approval, occasionally offering tips but mostly letting him figure it out, learning by doing. You're getting better at the bedtime routine, she said one evening after Jameson had successfully gotten Dashiell to sleep with a story about a whale who wanted to fly. I had a good teacher, he replied, nodding toward the baby monitor where Dashiell's soft breathing was audible. They were in her living room. Sloane curled in an armchair, Jameson on the couch. It was the first time she'd invited him to stay after Dashiell was asleep. Can I ask you something? Sloane said. Anything. The business. You really relocated your headquarters to Monterey? I did. We're opening a regional office here, 15 employees to start. I'm overseeing it personally. Jameson, she paused. That's a huge decision to make based on this. Based on my son? Based on trying to be the father he deserves? He met her eyes. It's the easiest decision I've ever made. My company can function from anywhere. My son is here. The math is simple. She looked away, but not before he saw something shift in her expression. Something soft, maybe the beginning of trust. If you're enjoying this story of second chances and redemption, make sure you've hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me what you think. Do you believe people can really change? Can broken trust ever be fully repaired? Your thoughts matter to this community we're building together. Now, let's continue with Jameson's journey. A month after their reunion, Jameson adapted one of the rooms in the house he'd bought for Dashiell. He filled it with educational toys, books about the ocean, a small bed shaped like a boat, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling arranged in actual constellations. I want to ask you something, he told Sloane during one of his visits. I'd like to have Dashiell at my house sometime, so he can see his room, get comfortable with the space. Sloane's jaw tightened. I'm not sure, Jameson. He's still very small, and he's never been away from me overnight. You can come too, of course, he quickly added. I'm not trying to separate you. I just want him to know that space, which is also his, whenever he's ready for it. After several days of thinking about it, Sloane finally agreed to visit Jameson's house. Just for an afternoon, just to see. The house was in a quiet neighborhood near the beach. 3 bedrooms, a yard with a garden. Nothing like his Los Angeles penthouse. This was a home, a real home, meant for living, not impressing. Sloane walked through it with Dashiell on her hip, taking in the details. The kitchen with a high chair already set up, the living room with cushions on the floor for playing, the shelf with children's books, and then Dashiell's room. You've thought of everything, she admitted, running her hand over the smooth wood of the eco-friendly crib. I want to do it right, he replied, while Dashiell enthusiastically explored his new toys. During the following weeks, the tension between them gradually began to decrease. Conversations were no longer strictly limited to Dashiell. Occasionally they talked about work, about mutual friends, about books or movies or the news. One evening, Sloane arrived to pick up Dashiell from Jameson's house and found him asleep in his father's arms while Jameson read to him a story about dolphins. Dashiell had fallen asleep during the part where the baby dolphin learned to jump. I didn't want to wake him up, Jameson whispered. Sloane watched the scene, her son perfectly comfortable and safe in his father's arms. Jameson holding Dashiell like he was the most precious thing in the world. Something stirred within her, an emotion she'd tried to keep buried. The memory of loving this man, of building a life with him, of believing they had a future. Would you like coffee while we wait for him to wake up? Jameson offered. Sloane nodded. For the first time in 2 years, they sat together on the deck of Jameson's house, with the Monterey Bay stretched out before them and the sound of seals barking in the distance, and simply talked, like 2 people sharing something important. Not like adversaries. Your latest book hit the bestseller list, Jameson said. I saw it in the bookstore. Number 3 on the New York Times. Number 2 now, Sloane said with a small smile. As of yesterday. That's incredible. I'm proud of you. She looked at him surprised. It was the kind of thing he used to say. Back when they were married. Back when they celebrated each other's successes. Thank you, she said quietly. They talked about her writing, about his company's new water purification project in Tanzania, about the changes in Monterey since he'd moved here, about everything and nothing. Easy conversation, like they used to have. As Dashiell's 2nd birthday approached, the inevitable question of how to celebrate arose. I was thinking of doing something small at my cottage, Sloane said. Just close family. My parents, Paige, maybe a few kids from his playgroup. Jameson nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. Of course, I understand. I can visit him the next day. Bring him a gift then. Sloane studied him for a moment. But I suppose your family now too, she added. If you want to come. Jameson's smile lit up his face. I'd be honored. Thank you. The birthday arrived. January 15th. A clear, bright winter day that made California feel like a miracle. Sloane's cottage was decorated with ocean-themed banners and balloons. There was a cake shaped like a whale, presents wrapped in paper covered with fish. Jameson's parents had flown in from Portland. His mother cried when she held Dashiell for the first time. His father, a quiet man who'd never been effusive, told Jameson he was proud of him for making things right. But it was Sloane's mother, Helen, who surprised him most. She pulled him aside when she arrived and said simply, "Hurt my daughter again, and I'll make sure you regret it. But I'm glad you're here. Dashiell needs his father." It was more grace than he deserved. Now, watching Dashiell toddle around the yard in a birthday hat, shrieking with laughter as he chased Bubbles, Jameson felt a contentment he'd never known. This was what mattered. Not deals or money or prestige. He's happy, Sloane said, appearing at his elbow. Her hand unconsciously rested on her stomach. A small gesture. Protective. You've done an amazing job with him, Jameson said. We're doing an amazing job with him, she corrected gently. The "we" was new, fragile, but real. When it was time for cake, everyone gathered around. Dashiell, chocolate-faced and gleeful, tried to blow out his candles. Needed help. The adults sang off key. Photos were taken. It was chaotic and perfect and ordinary. Everything Jameson had thought he couldn't have. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Jameson helped Sloane clean up. They'd fallen into an easy rhythm. He scraped plates. She loaded the dishwasher, neither needing to fill the silence with words. Thank you for being here, Sloane said as they finished. It meant a lot. To Dashiell. To me. There's nowhere else I'd be, he replied. She looked at him, something shifting in her expression. I've been thinking, she said, about what you said, about being a family. Jameson's heart stopped. And I'm not ready to jump back into marriage. I'm not ready to just forgive and forget and pretend the last 2 years didn't happen. Sloane, he started. But, she continued, I'm willing to try, to see if we can build something new. Not what we had before, but something different. Something stronger, maybe. Built on honesty this time. On actually talking to each other instead of making assumptions. I would like that very much, he said carefully. Afraid to hope too hard. It won't be easy, she warned. I'm still angry. I'm still hurt. And I'm scared, terrified actually, that you'll leave again. I won't, he began. You can't promise that. Not absolutely. But you can show me, day by day, that you're choosing to stay, that we're enough, that I'm enough to make you want to stay. You're more than enough, Sloane. You always have been. She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her shampoo. Something floral and soft. I loved you so much, she whispered. When you left, it nearly killed me. I don't know if I can survive losing you again. Then don't lose me. Let me stay. Let me prove that I've learned, that I've changed. People don't change, Jameson. Maybe not. But they can grow. They can learn from catastrophic mistakes. They can choose differently when given a second chance. She studied his face for a long moment, searching for truth, for proof, for courage. Then, slowly, she lifted onto her toes and kissed him. It was soft, tentative, nothing like the passionate desperation they'd shared before. It was a question and an answer, a risk and a promise. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Don't make me regret this, she said. I won't. I swear to you, Sloane, I won't. From inside the house, Dashiell called out, Mama, Jamie, come play. They looked at each other and smiled. Duty calls, Sloane said. The best kind of duty, Jameson replied. Together, they went inside to their son. Over the next 2 months, they rebuilt what had been broken. Slowly, carefully, like archaeologists piecing together something precious from fragments. They went to counseling, both separately and together. Learned how to communicate without assuming. How to share fears instead of making decisions alone. How to choose each other daily instead of taking each other for granted. It wasn't easy. Some days were hard. Some days Sloane still struggled with trusting him completely. Some days Jameson still battled the fear that he'd somehow fail them. But they kept choosing each other. And then, one evening in late March, Sloane called him at 2 a.m. Can you come over? She asked. Her voice was shaking. I need to tell you something and I can't do it over the phone. Jameson broke every speed limit getting to her cottage. She opened the door in pajamas, her eyes red from crying. Fear clutched his chest. What's wrong? Is Dashiell okay? He's fine. He's asleep. She stopped, took a breath. I'm pregnant. The world tilted. What? I'm pregnant. 10 weeks. I found out yesterday, but I was too shocked to. I didn't know how to tell you. Jameson's mind raced. Is it? He couldn't finish the question. It was too enormous. Yours? Yes. She laughed. A slightly hysterical sound. There hasn't been anyone else. There was one night, about 2.5 months ago. Do you remember? You were here for Dashiell's bedtime, and we had wine, and we were talking, and he remembered. They'd been sitting on her porch after Dashiell was asleep, sharing a bottle of wine and memories of when they'd been married. The night had felt suspended out of time, soft and sweet and dangerous. He'd almost kissed her goodnight, had stood on her porch with his hand on her cheek and his heart in his throat, and then she'd kissed him, and he'd kissed back, and things had progressed from there. Her bedroom, her gasping his name, the way she'd cried after and he'd held her, the agreement in the morning that it had been a mistake, that it couldn't happen again, that they needed to go slow. Clearly they hadn't been careful enough. I thought we agreed that was a mistake, he said carefully. We did. In the morning we agreed it couldn't happen again, that it was just, I don't know, unfinished business. Closure. Something. She wrapped her arms around herself. Clearly we didn't use adequate protection. Sloan, he started. I'm keeping the baby, she said quickly. I want to be clear about that. I'm 34 years old, and this might be my last chance, and I love being a mother, and I'm not asking you for anything. Stop, he said. He crossed to her, put his hands on her shoulders. Breathe. You're spiraling. She took a shaky breath. I want this child, he said clearly. I want to be involved, fully involved, from the beginning this time. But Sloan, we need to figure out what we're doing. We're not married. We're barely dating. We're co-parenting Dashiell, and now we're going to have another baby, and we need to. We need to. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know what we need to do. I don't know if I can trust you completely yet. I don't know if I even want to try getting married again. But I'm pregnant with your baby, and we already have a son together, and this is the most complicated mess I've ever been in. He pulled her into his arms. She let him. She was shaking. We'll figure it out, he said into her hair. Together, one step at a time. But Sloan, you need to know something. What? That night wasn't a mistake for me. It was the first time in 2 years I felt like myself, like I'd come home. She pulled back to look at him, tears streaming down her face. Don't say things like that. Don't make this harder. I'm not trying to make it harder. I'm trying to be honest. I never stopped loving you. Divorcing you was the biggest mistake of my life, and I've spent every day since trying to live with that. Now we have Dashiell, and we're going to have another child. And Sloan, I want us to be a family. A real family. You left me, she said. Her voice was small, wounded. How do I know you won't do it again? Because I know now what I'm losing. I didn't understand before. I thought I was being noble, but I was just a coward. I was afraid of failing you, so I didn't try. That's not noble. That's just fear winning. She searched his face, looking for proof, for promise, for truth. I need time, she finally said. I need to think. It's too much. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. He meant it. Whatever happened, whatever she decided, he would be here. For Dashiell, for their unborn child, for her if she'd let him. Even if she wouldn't, he'd be here. That was what being a father meant, what being a man meant. Showing up, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. The following weeks were a careful dance. Jameson came to every prenatal appointment, held Sloan's hand during the ultrasound, cried when they heard the heartbeat, a strong, steady rhythm. Their child, growing, healthy. He researched pregnancy, what she should eat, what to avoid, how to help with morning sickness. He brought her ginger tea and crackers, rubbed her feet when they swelled, read parenting books like he was studying for the most important exam of his life. And slowly, so slowly he almost didn't notice, Sloan's walls came down. She started reaching for his hand without thinking, started calling him when she had good news or bad news, or no news at all, started letting him back into the parts of her heart she'd locked away. 3 months after learning about the pregnancy, Sloan made a decision. Let's get married again, she said one evening. They were at his house. Dashiell was asleep upstairs in his room. Sloan was 6 months pregnant now, showing, glowing, beautiful. Jameson looked up from the book he'd been reading. What? Let's get married. Before the baby comes, she paused. I want this baby to have both parents. I want Dashiell to have a stable home. I want to try being a family, a real family. Not co-parents who share custody, but partners, together. Are you sure? He asked. Because if you're not, if you're just doing this because of the baby, that's not enough. I want you to marry me because you want to, because you trust me again, because you believe we can make this work. I'm terrified, she admitted. I'm terrified you'll leave again, that I'll wake up one day and you'll realize you made a mistake. But I'm more terrified of not trying, of our children growing up watching us be careful with each other instead of showing them what real love looks like. She put her hand on her swollen belly. I want to try, she said. I want to believe people can change, that broken things can be fixed, that second chances are real. Jameson crossed to her, knelt in front of her, put his hands over hers on her belly. I will spend every day of the rest of my life proving you made the right choice, he said. I will never take you for granted again. I will never make decisions without you again. I will show up. Every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. She smiled through tears. Then yes, let's get married. They married on the beach at sunset. Small ceremony, just close family and friends. Dashiell as ring bearer, taking his job very seriously. Sloane in a simple dress that accommodated her pregnant belly. Jameson in a suit, barefoot in the sand. The vows were different this time. More honest, more hard-won. I promise to tell you the truth, even when it scares me, Jameson said. I promise to trust you with my fears instead of making decisions alone. I promise to choose you every single day for the rest of my life. I promise to let you in, Sloane replied. To trust you even when it's hard. To believe in us even when I'm scared. To build this family with you, together. When they kissed, Dashiell clapped, not fully understanding what was happening, but infected by the joy of the moment. 3 months later, their daughter was born. Marin Grace Kane, 7 pounds even, a head full of dark hair and Sloane's jade eyes. Jameson was there for everything. Every contraction, every push, every moment. When they placed Marin in his arms for the first time, he wept. This is what I missed, he said to Sloane. With Dashiell. Thank you for letting me be here. You're here now, she replied. Exhausted and beautiful and perfect. That's what matters. 2 years later, their house on the cliff overlooking Monterey Bay was full of life. Dashiell, now 4, was explaining ocean currents to Marin with the serious authority of someone who'd watched a lot of nature documentaries. And then the whales eat the krill, he said. And the krill eat the tiny plants, and it's all connected, Mari. Everything's connected. Connected, Marin repeated. At 2 years old, she was a tiny tyrant with Sloane's auburn hair and Jameson's stubborn streak. Jameson stood on the deck, watching his family. Sloane was pregnant again. A surprise, but a welcome one. They'd be a family of 5 by summer. What are you thinking about? Sloane asked, appearing beside him and slipping her hand into his. How lucky I am, he said simply. How close I came to missing all of this. But you didn't miss it. You're here. I'm here, he agreed. It hadn't been easy, these 2 years. They'd worked at their marriage, gone to counseling, learned how to fight productively, how to communicate without assuming, how to choose each other daily. Some days were still hard. Some days Sloane still had moments of doubt. Some days Jameson still feared he'd somehow fail them all. But they chose each other. Every day, they chose each other. And that made all the difference. Life doesn't always follow the path we plan, Jameson thought as he watched his children play. Sometimes we make catastrophic mistakes. Sometimes we destroy the most precious things we have out of fear. But sometimes, if we're very lucky, we get a second chance. Not to erase the past. Not to pretend the pain never happened, but to build something new from the ruins. Something stronger, something real. He'd been given that chance, and he would never take it for granted again. From inside the house, Dashiell called out, Dad, can you help me find my whale book? I want to show Mari. Dad, not Jamie, not Jameson. Dad. He'd never get tired of hearing it. Coming, buddy, he called back. Sloane kissed him, soft and sweet. Go, I'll start dinner. He started toward the house, then paused. Hey, Sloane. Yeah? Thank you for giving me another chance, for letting me be part of this, for everything. She smiled, that radiant smile that had first made him fall in love with her so many years ago. Thank you for staying, she said, for choosing us, for showing up every single day, even when it's hard. Easiest choice I've ever made, he replied. And it was true. He'd built companies, changed industries, made billions, but his greatest achievement, his most important work, was right here, in this house, with this woman, raising these children. Everything else was just noise. This was the signal. This was home. As Jameson Cain walked inside to read to his son about whales and play with his daughter, and kiss his wife's belly where their third child grew, he thought about that day at LAX. The shock of seeing Sloane with a baby, the fear and confusion and desperate hope. He'd been right to hope, because some stories don't end at divorce. Some stories are just beginning, waiting for the characters to be brave enough to turn the page. Their story had ended once, badly, in pain and misunderstanding, but their new story, the one they were writing together with honesty and grace and the willingness to keep choosing love, that story was just hitting its stride. And it was beautiful. If this story touched your heart, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to make things right, that broken trust can be rebuilt, that second chances are real if we're brave enough to fight for them. And tell me in the comments, what's the most important lesson you're taking away from Jameson and Sloane's journey? What would you have done differently? Subscribe to Love and Twilights with Dr. Phillips for more stories that remind us what really matters in life. Stories about love and redemption and the courage it takes to rebuild what we've broken. Because at the end of the day, success isn't measured by your bank account or your job title. It's measured by whether you show up for the people who matter, whether you choose love even when it's scary, whether you're willing to do the hard work of earning back trust you've destroyed. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for listening to Jameson and Sloane's story. And remember, it's never too late to become the person you should have been all along. I'll see you in the next video.